SEP Fanfic Readings presents Aurelian by BittyBlueEyes. Chapter 32, Confringo. The day after what Hermione called her lapse in judgment seemed to speed by quickly and easily. Considering all that had happened the previous day, Hermione felt that things would continue to be chaotic, but it was actually rather relaxed, and it made the previous day feel much like a strange dream. The constant reminder that it had not been a dream were the blotchy burn scars that trailed up her right arm. She knew that Fred had suggested using the burn paste once or twice daily for the scars to fade, but she used it nearly every hour, in hopes that they might vanish before the banquet that evening. Draco glanced at her arm every few minutes, making Hermione feel both guilty and self-conscious. She could tell by the look in his eyes that it bothered him to see her hurt, and it only made her feel guiltier. She knew that she would hurt the same way had their positions been reversed. It felt strange, but also comforting, to know that he cared so much. He had not wanted to leave her the night before. She tried to reassure him over and over that she would be fine and that she wouldn't ever do something so reckless again, but he'd had a hard time letting go of her. In the end, though, she was able to talk him into joining Blaise and Pansy to celebrate Blaise's promotion. It was a great honor for Blaise, and Draco would have been sorry later if he had not gone. Not to mention, he had not seen Pansy since the first night he went to speak to Mr. Parkinson, and had left her in such an upset state. He had owled her like he had promised, but it was only to say that he really couldn't discuss things. He'd admitted to Hermione that it was difficult for him and Blaise to meet with her and not tell her anything they knew about the case, but it made it easier by the fact that Pansy was unaware of Blaise's involvement. In the end, Draco was glad that he had gone, and despite the awkwardness, they'd had a great private celebration with just the three of them. She, Harry, and Draco met up at Richmond's transcripts to speak with Dean that morning, and Dean agreed immediately. In fact, he didn't seem to think anything of their request for forged letters and assured him that he would be able to finish them by the next day. He did find it rather curious, though, that they wished him to forge letters that had no signature. After that, the three of them met Katie during her lunch break, and she also was honored to accept the task. Having learned all of what they were going on secretly, she had been feeling quite useless in it all. She was proud to have something she could help with, even if it was as simple as delivering letters. Hermione had mentioned the possibility of returning to the Lestrange's house with the two of them to look over the other books in the hidden room, but they quickly shot down the idea. They were both still upset with her for going alone, and she had a feeling that it influenced their decision, but they assured her that it did not. They believed that she and Ron had examined the home enough. They had no desire to see what other terrible secrets and possible threats lay hidden in the shelves of dusty tomes. After lunch, Draco, Harry, and Hermione all went their separate ways, and Hermione's first stop was Madame Mulkin's to pick up her dress for the evening. As soon as she did, thoughts of Death Eaters fell from her mind, and she was filled with the same giddy feelings she had when she was 15 and getting ready to attend the Yule Ball. She hoped her evening with Draco would end much better. She picked up Aurelian from the burrow next, and Ginny accompanied them both to Hermione's flat. She had seen that Hermione was bubbling with nerves and anticipation, and was excited to help her friend prepare. She had also seen Hermione's increasing guilt toward Aurelian for shipping him out so often, so she offered to babysit at Hermione so that Aurelian could sleep at home. Aurelian, surrounded by girlish giggles, became just as excited, though he really didn't know what he was excited about. He was in awe to see his mother so dressed up, but it was nothing to the way that Draco's eyes had popped when she'd entered the living room where he'd waited with Aurelian for her to finish. Draco's facade of calm detachment disappeared instantly as worshipful awe took over. Hermione had to work hard to keep herself from teasing him, as he stared at her with his mouth slightly open. She stood still as his eyes traveled down her elegant taupe gown and back up to take in her one bared shoulder. She did allow a giggle to sleep out when his eyes returned to her chest area again. Ginny laughed out loud as she came up behind Hermione and saw his face. "Catching flies, Malfoy?" Draco's eyes seemed to focus before his jaw shut with a snap. Both women could see his struggle to gain his composure, but refrained from further laughter. "You look amazing," he finally announced. His compliment caused a happy smile to burst across Hermione's face as she nervously smoothed her hands down the silky material, even as a blush bloomed. "Thank you. You look really nice, too," she grinned. Draco started to make his way around the sofa toward her when a small body slammed into his legs. "Mummy hot enough for you to shag senseless, Daddy?" All three adults gasped and gaped at Aurelian as he looked back at them innocently. "Ginny!" Hermione finally turned on her friend. "How many times do I have to say little ears?" "I didn't know he was there," Ginny defended herself. Draco realized what must have happened and dropped down on one knee to face his son. "Ari, that's not a nice thing to ask someone. You didn't do anything wrong, but let's not ask that again, okay?" Aurelian hung his head and nodded. Draco pulled him into a quick hug to let him know that they weren't upset with him. Then, to prove his point, he mock-whispered to his son, "Don't tell her I said so, but yes, your mommy looks very hot." As expected, Aurelian giggled at their secret, and then mortified Hermione by loudly whispering a secret back to his father. "Mummy went to see your bum in dress pants." Draco and Ginny's bark of laughter made little Ari laugh and clap along, as Hermione's face blossomed with color once again. Still laughing, Draco straightened and winked at her. "Little ears, Hermione." Not wanting to risk any further embarrassment, Hermione shook her head. With a small smile playing on her lips, she took a deep, calming breath and asked, "Are you ready to go?" "Ginny?" Hermione called quietly as she stuck her head in the front door of her flat later that evening. "Yeah, I'm here," Ginny said, peeking over the back of the sofa. Hermione and Draco entered quietly. "Is Aurelian asleep?" Hermione asked. "It's after 10. What kind of babysitter would I be if he was still awake?" she replied, setting a bowl of popcorn on the coffee table and turning off the television. "How did it go?" Hermione asked. "We had fun. He was spent when I put him down at 8:30. We played Super Witch, Troll Hunters, and hide-and-go-seek, then snuggled down and watched a little television before he went to bed." "Sounds like you had a great time. Thank you so much," Hermione said ardently. "My pleasure. Oh, I grabbed some pajamas from your drawer for you, too. I thought you'd rather not go digging through your drawers while he was sleeping. It's just a tank top and sleep shorts, but they're better than sleeping in that dress," Ginny said as she looked around the living room. "If I could only remember where I put them. Oh, I think they're on the kitchen table. Just a sec." "The kitchen table?" Draco asked with an amused smile. "It's not as crazy as it sounds. Aurelian has the incredible ability to distract you and make you forget what you were doing," Hermione replied. "I had an amazing time tonight," he said, pulling her closer. "I never thought that I'd actually enjoy an event like this." "I had a great time, too." She smiled up at him with starry eyes. "Your cousin is even more incredible than I thought." "Yeah, she's not bad," he admitted. "Well, I'll see you tomorrow." Hermione nodded and closed her eyes as she received his tender kiss. "Thank you," she said softly. "No, thank you," he smiled. "Tomorrow." He nodded. "You don't have to go," Ginny said, standing awkwardly in the kitchen doorway. "I'm leaving now." "I have to get going anyway. Thank you, Ginny," he said. "Any time, Draco." Draco took a tiny pinch of flue powder from the bag on the mantelpiece and disappeared in a swirl of green flames. "So, how'd it go?" Ginny asked excitedly, plopping down on the sofa. Since Draco left, she had no intention of leaving without details. Hermione's face lit up as she plopped down next to her ginger friend. "It was wonderful. I was so nervous, but I wasted way too much time worrying over nothing. It was really fun." "Keep going," Ginny prodded. "Well, it started with dinner. I was rather apprehensive being surrounded by Malfoys. I mean, a large round table of them. But it really wasn't bad. They definitely put on airs, but it was more relaxed than I thought it would be. And his cousin, Angelica, the one who was being honored, she was great. I mean, I revered her for her work, but she's terribly interesting and easy to talk to. I never thought I'd say that about anyone related to a Malfoy. She likes to poke fun at Draco and shared a few stories about him when he was a little boy. I also got to meet their second cousins, Marvin and Sylvia Burke. They had much the same attitude. They were like a regular family. It was the generation above them that were overly serious. Even then, I never thought I'd see Narcissa so relaxed. She didn't insult me once. In fact, "In fact, what?" Ginny asked. "No, well, it almost felt like she was showing me off at times. I don't know," Hermione said, shaking her head. "Anyway, after that came speeches. It really wasn't so bad, as I was really interested. And after that, there was dancing." "Dancing, huh?" Ginny said, raising her eyebrows. "He's a great dancer," Hermione blushed. "I'd hope so. He's grown up going to balls. Hermione, I'm so excited for you. It sounds like a wonderful time." "It really was," she responded, lost in a dreamy daze. "Well, I won't keep you up any longer. You look exhausted," Ginny said, hopping off the couch. "Thanks again, Ginny, for everything." "My pleasure. I'm really glad you found him. He seems great for you." "I think he really is," she said, staring into the distance. "Pretty strange, huh?" "No. You never really know what life is going to give you," Ginny replied. "Good night, Hermione." After Ginny left, Hermione got dressed in the bathroom and pulled her curly hair down from the elegant styling Ginny had helped her achieve. It was so strange to see herself looking so alive and happy. It wasn't that she'd been unhappy before, but she just hadn't felt the exciting spark until Draco and Aurelian had come along. Aurelian? She had been thinking about him a lot. She felt so guilty for sending him away every day. She was able to see him in the mornings and evenings, but since he had come into her life, they had never just had one day to sit around the house together. She had actually felt kind of jealous when Ginny described the evenings she'd shared with him. Hermione felt that she owed it to him, as his mother, to share that kind of time. She was determined to make that happen. There was going to be no end to the work she needed to do, so she was just going to have to force some time for just her and Aurelian. He needed her, and in that she realized that she needed him too. After examining her tired smile once more, she turned off the light and went into her room. As soon as she climbed into bed, the small boy curled up to her side. He was sweet beyond words, and she felt so blessed to have him. A soft noise pulled Hermione from her sleep, but before she was fully drawn to consciousness, she began to mourn the loss of her peaceful dream. She had been flying with Draco, pulled close to him on his broom, as they soared in the sunset. It was something that she was coming to enjoy. She blinked into the darkness and scanned the room, trying to remember why she had awoken. Believing that it was a noise, she lifted her head from her pillow to listen for it to come again. She smiled softly when she felt the small, warm body curled up against her back. It seemed that no matter how much space she tried to give him, Aurelian followed her every inch. Deciding that it had probably just been a mumble or wiggle from Aurelian that pulled her from sleep, she laid back down, hoping to return to her dream. No sooner than her head touched the pillow, a loud crash reverberated through the house. Hermione sat up instantly, her eyes wide and her heart pounding. "Put the wards up. I don't want her to run." Hermione paled instantly in horror as the voice reached her ears. The voice was unmistakable, one that regularly haunted her nightmares. Bellatrix Lestrange was in her home, and she wasn't alone. It was only a split second after Bellatrix had spoken that Hermione felt a magical shift in the atmosphere. They had raised their own anti-apparition ward. "Mummy?" Aurelian murmured sleepily behind her. With a speed she hadn't known since the war, Hermione flew into action. Snatching her wand from her bedside table, in one swift movement she pulled Aurelian to her chest and slid beneath the bed. "Mummy, shh!" She shushed him immediately. Taking no chances, she cast a silencing charm on her son. "There are no lamps or candles," a male's voice said in confusion. "She lives like a muggle," Bellatrix said in disgust. Hermione's panic grew as she became more alert and aware of her situation. She was certain they'd locked the door. Her only way out was the fireplace, and she had to pass them to get there. She didn't know how many of them there were, but with the 2 voices she had heard, she was outnumbered already. She stared down at her panic-stricken son, desperately searching her mind for a plan of escape. Nothing came. Their only chance at the moment was hiding. With soft, whispered spells, Hermione cast disillusionment charms on both her and Aurelian. "The bad people are here. We must be still and quiet," she whispered, curling her body protectively over him. Hermione's heart thundered in her chest when she saw a light flash beneath the door. "Oh, Granger," Bellatrix taunted. "We know you're here. Why don't you come out and play?" Hermione heard the sound of the woman's shoes on her floor, followed by the tromping of men. She held Aurelian tighter when she saw the shadows of those beneath the door. The door handle turned and the door swung in. It was all happening so fast. Too fast. Hermione looked over her shoulder and saw that the disillusionment charm had not yet reached her toes. Other than that, she and Aurelian blended in with her surroundings. It wasn't like an invisibility cloak. She could see a basic outline of Aurelian's features when he moved, but only because she knew he was there. "Please let it be enough," Hermione silently pleaded. "She's not here," voiced another male. "Of course she's here," Bellatrix sneered, taking slow, arrogant steps into the room. "Aren't you, Mudblood?" Hermione felt Aurelian quake beneath her. His whole body twitched when the room suddenly filled with light. It was a soft, flickering light. They had found the oil lamp on her dresser. She couldn't breathe as she watched the movement of their shoes from under her bedskirt. "I said, aren't you, Mudblood?" Bellatrix said more harshly. "Confringo!" Without warning, the entire bed exploded above Hermione. She tried her best to remain silent, but something between a grunt and a scream escaped her as a piece of the splintered wood frame embedded into her skin. A large piece of the headboard flew from behind and smashed into the back of her skull, causing lights to flash in her vision. She was still invisible to them, but the large pieces that leaned against her revealed her position. "That's what I thought," Bellatrix chuckled darkly. "Not very Gryffindor to be hiding under the bed now, is it?" Hermione could feel Aurelian's silent screams coming in long strings. He was wailing and shaking in fright. "Merlin, how do I get out of this?" She looked just ahead of her, right where the foot of her bed had once rested against her cedar chest. and saw her wand lying flat against the wall. She hadn't realized until then that it had left her hand. How could she have let it go? I was protecting Ori from the blast. Was he all right? He was screaming, but was he hurt or just frightened? Silent, just like the last time. I'm starting to get the impression that you don't like speaking to me, Mudblood, Bellatrix jeered. You know why we're here, don't you? Rodolphus asked. You didn't really think we wouldn't know you were tromping around my home, did you? Mucking up the walls with that filthy blood of yours. Destroying that sacred book! Bellatrix snapped. Hermione gasped as she received a sharp kick to her hip. I want to know how you knew. I used my blood to open the wall. How did I take it so lightly? Careless. It wasn't a request, Bellatrix shouted. How did you learn of my return? What do you know? Oh, Aurelian, how do I get us out of this? Answer me! Crucio! She knew it was coming, but she couldn't stop it. Hermione screamed in agony as excruciating pain grabbed each and every nerve in her body. She felt Aurelian screaming silently beneath her and used what little conscious thought she had to keep him from collapsing on top of him. When the spell was released, Hermione panted and sobbed. Her muscles ached like they had been pushed through the weeks of hard labor. She allowed her arms to give way so that she supported herself on her elbows. Her face was so close to Aurelian's that she could feel the vibrations of his silent, high-pitched wailing. Stubborn just like the last time, I see. You won't lie to me this time, though. Tell me what I want to know, Bellatrix demanded. When Hermione didn't speak, she lifted her wand again. Crucio! Hermione's muscles stiffened again, and again. She screamed. Her body burned with pain. It felt as though fire was housed in her bones and flowed through her veins. She gripped the floor, her fingernails digging into the floorboards. As she struggled not to smother the boy beneath her, her head rubbed against the floor next to his, and she felt her nails beginning to separate from her skin. Just when she thought she could no longer hold herself up, the spell was ended. Her body shook with sobs, and she felt her heartbeat pounding in her head. Bellatrix's voice sounded distant and muffled when she spoke again. You can't keep this up forever, but I certainly will. Now give it up, and I may consider being merciful and end your life quickly. No, Merlin, help me. Hermione watched the drop of blood drip onto Aurelian's invisible face. She didn't realize until then that she had bitten her lip until it bled. She looked up at her wand, reaching her hand out toward it, and put every piece of herself into summoning it, but it didn't even budge. Have it your way. Crucio! Hermione's body locked again and twisted in agony. Every cell in her body vibrated, calling out for magic coursing through it. There was no pain in the world more fierce than that curse. Her voice became hoarse from her shrieking and died away as she ran out of breath. Her body was so tense that she couldn't muster the energy it took just to breathe. Her mind was slipping, as was her consciousness, just from the lack of oxygen. She felt her toe break from the effort to remain motionless. This was it. She wasn't going to be able to withstand much more. Mummy! Mummy! Aurelian's cry broke through the room. The strength of his utter terror had broken through the silencing spell. Mummy? Bellatrix said in confusion. It was the only time Hermione had ever heard the woman's voice without menace or rage. The spell ended and Hermione trembled uncontrollably, shuddering with each painful breath. Mummy? A child? Bellatrix asked, looking at her husband suspiciously. Rodolphus shrugged his shoulders and shook his head, illustrating that he had not known himself. Bellatrix looked around the room, and Hermione saw her pick up the robe Aurelian had worn earlier that day. Aurelian's cries had not stopped, and Hermione used the distraction as cover as she slowly inched herself and Aurelian closer to her wand. A child? Bellatrix strode forward and kicked Hermione hard in her side, pushing her over. Hermione held Aurelian tightly to herself and tried to roll back over to protect him. With the invisibility charm still in place, Bellatrix could not visually separate the two of them. Stop fighting, she muttered. Kicking Hermione again, she reached down and grabbed a handful of hair. At the child's increased volume, she knew she had acquired her target. No! Stop! Hermione shouted, scrambling to take hold of any piece of Aurelian she could. But Bellatrix's boot shoved against her, and she ripped the boy from her grasp. No! Let him go! Aurelian! Hermione lunged forward on her knees, trying to take hold of the invisible boy stuck in the vice-like grip of her deranged attacker. Get back, the third man ordered, kicking her in the neck. Hermione's head hit the floor, and she struggled to see straight. Let's have a look at you, shall we? Bellatrix smirked maliciously. She whacked him on the head harder than she needed to, and his body slowly began to appear. She held him firm in place by the tight grip she had on his soft brown hair. I never would have guessed. Granger has a muddy little baby. Let him go. Please let him go, Bellatrix, please, Hermione pleaded. She speaks, Bellatrix smiled wickedly. Don't you dare address her so commonly, you filth, Rodolphus commanded. Hermione only whimpered when she was hit with his stinging hex. She didn't have it in her to scream any more. Mummy! Mummy! Aurelian continued to bawl. Oh, shut up, you filthy brat, Bellatrix ordered, jerking his hair. Stay back! Hermione had tried to take Aurelian from her again, but Bellatrix managed to kick her directly in the face. Stop! Aurelian, please don't hurt him. I suppose I could consider that request. It will depend on you, though, she said derisively. Your mummy won't tell me what I want, no matter what I do to her. I bet she'll reconsider for you, though, she told Aurelian in a mock baby voice. We'll see. Crush, Bella, Rodolphus interrupted flatly. What? She snapped, scowling at him dangerously. He said nothing. Hermione turned and followed her gaze to the place he was pointing. It was the ring. It had fallen off its place on her side table. Bellatrix's eyes widened, making her look more deranged than ever. Her head snapped in the other direction, staring in Hermione's direction in disbelief. No, it's not possible. You're not thinking that... Bellatrix did not allow her husband to finish. She was shaking Aurelian by the hair again. Who are you? Who is your father? Stop bawling, you brat, and tell me. Aurelian, frightened by her outburst, cried even harder. A loud clap resounded through the room as Bellatrix's hand came down on the boy's cheek. Who's your father? Is it Draco? Mummy! Mummy! Aurelian cried desperately. Oh, no, you don't, the third man sneered when he saw Hermione's outline scrambling for her wand. His boot collided with the side of her head, and she fell hard against the wall, even further from Aurelian and still out of reach of her wand. Shut up! Bellatrix bellowed, slapping Aurelian again. Stop it! He's just a boy! Hermione cried desperately. Aurelian continued to howl in fright and pain, but when his hair was jerked again, his eyes widened and he stared directly into her face, his lip quivering. Those eyes, Bellatrix said quietly. Draco's. She looked back at the ring and bent to pick it up. It was mere centimeters from her grasp when she was thrown suddenly against the wall, the cry of impedimenta ringing through the room. Hermione swayed where she stood, her wand tight in her hand. She hadn't fully found her balance before she drove forward and scooped up her son from the floor. She bent double as she made for the door and dodged spells as she ran full tilt. Accio! Came out as a pant, hidden in her ragged breathing. She felt the ring slip onto her thumb as she ran into the living room. Without pause, she reached out for the bag of flue powder, Aurelian clinging to the body of his still invisible mother. The flue powder slipped from her fingers and spilled over the floor. Hermione's eyes widened as one of the men came into view. She hadn't the time to waste on identifying the man. Just the sight of his wand was enough to send her to the flue, to avoid the curse that shot out of the tip. She swept some of the flue powder from the floor directly into the fire and lunged in. Malfoy Manor! The face of Rodolphus Lestrange was the last thing she saw before her home spun out of sight. Hermione fell out of the fireplace and sobbed with both relief and pain as her knees crashed against the marble floor. She stood Aurelian in front of her and caught her aching body on one hand to keep from collapsing completely. Her head rested against Aurelian's middle, and she wrapped one arm around his waist, holding him to her to comfort both of them. Tears streamed freely down her bruised cheeks. Aurelian's wail continued, echoing loudly off the walls of the large, empty entrance hall. Unexpected cracks sounded, and Hermione looked up to see Perny cowering nervously at the side of the room. Master Aurelian? She asked tentatively. And me, Hermione panted. She tapped her wand on the top of her head, and her body slowly started to become visible in the dancing light of the fire. Get Draco. Hurry. Just as her shoulder started to appear, the flames behind her flashed green again. Aurelian shrieked and quaked violently in the fresh wave of terror as Bellatrix appeared in the flames. Hermione grabbed him protectively, but as suddenly as she appeared, Bellatrix was swept away, forced out by the wards that protected the property. Hermione sobbed harder. Perny trembled uncertainly before vanishing with another crack. We're safe, Hermione softly told her son. She heard Draco's footsteps thundering down the stairs before he appeared. When he did, Aurelian cried out for him immediately. Daddy! Aurelian! Hermione! Gods, what happened? He panicked. He raced to their sides and collapsed to his knees. Bellatrix, she sobbed. What? She came to my home. Oh gods, Draco. Finding safety and comfort in his presence, Hermione finally released all that she had been holding inside, weeping uncontrollably in front of him. Draco's arms encircled them both. Perny, get Mother, Draco said, forcing his voice to remain steady. The sight of the broken pair filled him with both pain and fury, and he struggled to remain steady and calm for them both. You're bleeding. What happened? Draco asked. Bleeding was the gentlest way he could think to phrase it. She was so battered. Her nose broken and her face so bloody and bruised that she hardly looked like his Hermione at all. Careless. I was careless. Draco? Narcissa's worried voice came from the top of the staircase. Merlin, what happened? She hurriedly shuffled toward them. Bad people, Aurelian managed between broken sobs. Bellatrix, Draco answered. And 2 others, Hermione answered softly. We can't stay here, Draco. It's the first place I thought of, but it's not safe enough. She tried to follow. What? Narcissa asked, pulling her dress robe tighter around herself. She followed by Flu, but the wards held. She's angry, though. Livid. She'll do what she can to get here. We need to go to Harry's. Draco nodded. Perny, go to Potter's and wake him. Tell him we're coming right now. The house elf nodded and vanished. Let me help you, Draco said. He stood up with Aurelian on one arm and slid his other arm around Hermione's weak frame to help her to her feet. You take her, Draco. I'll hold Aurelian, Narcissa offered. No, Daddy! Aurelian clung tightly to the safety of his father's arms. It's okay, Aurelian, Draco said soothingly. I've got him, Mother. Narcissa nodded and gently stroked the boy's hair. You first, Hermione. I'll follow after with Ori, Draco instructed. I'll send Harry here, Hermione told them. He's his own secret keeper. She won't be able to come until he reveals it to her personally. I know, said Draco. Then stay with her. I'll take Ori, Hermione told him. I'll be fine, Narcissa told Draco. Draco nodded to his mother, took a pinch of Flu powder, and tossed it in the grate. In you go, Hermione. I'll be 2 steps after. Hermione stepped into the flames and breathed her destination softly. Her world spun around again before she stepped out as carefully as she could, but she still stumbled toward the table. She leaned over it to steady herself before tenderly taking a seat. As the adrenaline rush slowly began to fade, she became more aware of her injuries. She could feel the large splinters protruding from her back and legs. Suddenly, the kitchen door burst open and Harry stood there with his eyes wide and panicked, his glasses lying crookedly on his nose. Hermione! What happened? The fire burned green, and Draco stepped into the kitchen with Aurelian in his arms. Harry, hardly able to miss Hermione's blatant injuries, scanned the 2 newcomers and noticed the bruise and blood on Aurelian's face, as well as the blood on Draco's bare chest. What happened? He demanded again. Bellatrix, Hermione said. At Hermione's vague explanation, he turned to Draco. I'm not quite sure. They showed up like this, Draco told him. Bellatrix and 2 others showed up at her place. Oh, Merlin, Hermione, Harry said, kneeling in front of her. She knows that we know, Harry. They have to leave the burrow, she said. Merlin, You'll get Narcissa first, Hermione told him. She's waiting for you. I think it's more dangerous there right now. Right, said Harry. Creature! At Creature's appearance, Harry quickly relayed his orders. Go to the burrow and wake Ginny. Tell her to wake everyone else up and come immediately to Grimmauld Place. Tell them it's an emergency. They can't even get dressed. Sir, Creature bowed and vanished. Malfoy Manor, right? Harry checked. Draco nodded, and Harry disappeared in the flue. Merlin, I can't believe this is happening, Draco breathed, staring mournfully at Hermione. He wanted to touch her, but was too afraid he'd hurt her. It was with apprehension that he reached out and tenderly cupped her cheek. Hermione flinched in pain and wished that she could have suppressed the movement because Draco pulled away. Despite the pain, she desired his touch. Draco looked down at the whimpering child in his arms and gently wiped the blood from his face. The fireplace chimed, and Ginny's panicked cry rang through the kitchen before she fully came into view. Harry! Her eyes immediately fell on Hermione, and she gasped, covering her mouth in horror. Godric! What happened? She looked around frantically. Where's Harry? Potter's fine. He's retrieving my mother, Draco stated. Oh, Hermione, what happened? Ginny choked out, kneeling in front of her friend with tears already gathering in her eyes. Hermione looked despondent. her eyes distant as silent tears ran down her cheeks. "Harry!" Ron stepped out of the fireplace before it finished its announcing chime. "Hermione!" "Shut up, Ron!" Ginny snapped. "What?" Before Ginny could repeat her question, Ron was bumped from behind by Narcissa Malfoy. Without a thought, Ron stepped to the side and offered her his hand to assist her out of the fireplace. She looked quite shaken, not at all the composed woman she normally was. She had stepped to the side just in time as Molly Weasley appeared next. Hermione's eyes met them all as they appeared, but she felt outside of herself. "What is going on? What happened?" Molly asked, looking from one face to another. "Godric! Hermione! Aurelian! Draco!" Molly worried, looking at the three bruised and bloody figures. "Not me. It's not mine," Draco said, looking down at the blood smeared on his chest. Normally he would have felt uncomfortable standing around in just his sleep pants, but given the circumstances, the thought didn't even cross his mind. Seeing that Aurelian and Draco looked all right, Molly immediately joined Ginny in kneeling at Hermione's feet. She gently swept Hermione's hair to the side to have a better look at her face. The fireplace chimed twice more. "Move, Potter," Draco said flatly, knowing that Mr. Weasley was following right behind. Harry was able to shuffle to the side just in time. It was becoming increasingly difficult to find a place to stand as they all stood between the fireplace and the table. "What's happening?" Arthur asked in a strong and serious tone. "They were attacked," said Draco, speaking so that Hermione wouldn't have to. Ron stroked Aurelian's hair as he continued his soft weeping. "Bellatrix broke into her house, with 2 others. "Why? How did she know?" Ginny asked. "It's my fault." Hermione's voice was quite small, but everyone heard her clearly, each heart aching as they stared at her battered friend. "They knew I went to the house. I was careless. They know what we know." "Merlin, what were we thinking letting you stay there alone without protective wards? Everywhere else is protected. How could we leave you so vulnerable?" Ron said with guilt and remorse. "We just never thought of it. My home has always been safe before. Besides, there are too many people that come and go for me to ward it like that. We just never thought." "We should have thought," Harry burst with agonizing guilt and frustration. "Godric, how could I let this happen to you? You should have been staying with me." "Harry," Hermione said meekly. "God!" Harry was pacing furiously in front of the fireplace, his fingers running through his hair. "Harry," Ginny scolded, "you're not helping anything by acting like this." "Speaking of, why are we all standing here? They need to be treated," Narcissa said severely. "Merlin, yes," Molly agreed. "Harry, where's your first aid kit?" "Creature, the first aid kit," Harry requested of the house elf before turning back to the group. "Hermione, you said there were her and 2 others?" Hermione nodded slowly. "Who were they?" he pressed. "Rodolphus, and another man. I'd never seen him before." Her frown deepened as she remembered their faces. "Ron, shield cloaks," Harry said flatly. Ron nodded resolutely. "No!" Ginny shouted, jumping to her feet. "You're not going after them!" "She's right, Harry, you can't," said Hermione. "We're not ready yet. There are still things we need to know. We don't even know if she's still there, but if she is, she'll be expecting you." Harry balled his fists at his sides. Fury burned inside of him, and he felt helpless. Molly had silently taken the first aid kit from Creature and set it on the kitchen table as she began to examine Hermione more closely. "Aurelian, too," Hermione said. 2 more tears leaked as she looked down at the whimpering little boy in Draco's arms. "Of course we'll care for him, dear, but you're much worse off right now," Molly softly replied. "It looks a bit too serious to treat in here. Why don't we treat you upstairs?" "You should go with her, Draco," Narcissa suggested. Draco nodded. "I'll look after Aurelian," Ginny offered. "No, Daddy," Aurelian said, clinging tightly to his father's neck. "It's okay, Ori," Ginny assured him. "No, my Daddy." "Aurelian," Draco said mildly, "do you see that Mommy is very hurt?" Aurelian nodded with a pout. "You want Mommy to be better, don't you?" he asked. Aurelian nodded again. "Then you have to let me go take care of her," he explained. "Ginny will take very good care of you and make you all better. All right?" Hermione felt guilty. She felt that she should tell Draco to stay with Aurelian instead, but she couldn't bear the thought of sending him away when she so desperately wanted him near. After a moment's consideration, Aurelian conceded. "Actually, I'm not that confident with healing," Ginny said guiltily as she accepted Ori into her arms, perching him on her hip. "I can do it," Narcissa offered. "Hermione, dear, can you walk?" Molly asked. Hermione nodded, and Draco helped her to her feet. "Hermione, one last thing," Arthur interjected before they disappeared up the kitchen stairs. Hermione turned and saw the fear masked behind his strong posture. The rest of my family, the other boys, will they be safe? I should think so, yes, Hermione answered. She wanted me. She wanted to know what we know. The reason that I thought to bring you here is because I think she suspects Harry and Ron of being involved. I have a feeling that she's after Draco and I'm more, but I couldn't leave Ron and all of you unprotected. Harry was safe here. We're all safe here, Harry corrected. And the burrow is still warded, so it should be in good shape, said Ron. I don't care, Hermione said heatedly. I don't want anyone leaving here until we've discussed things. Hermione, I wasn't saying, Ron started defensively. Promise me, everyone. No one leaves until we've discussed things, and I've had my say, Hermione insisted. The mixture of pain, fear, and ferocity in her tear-filled eyes pierced every heart. We promise, Harry said, speaking for the group. He knew that she needed his promise over any other. It was the only thing he could give to soothe her in any way, and he gave it to her without hesitation. Hermione nodded and followed Molly up the kitchen staircase. After stumbling twice, Draco lifted her up in his arms. Have you got her, Draco? Or would you like to apparate? We still have 2 staircases after this, Molly frowned. I've got her. I don't want to apparate. It would only hurt her worse, he answered. Molly nodded and continued, leading them up to the second guest's bedroom. Upon entering the room, she stepped to the side and lit the lamps. Draco gingerly placed Hermione upon the cream-colored blankets that covered the queen-size bed. Hermione rolled onto her stomach so as not to agitate her wounds any further. Merlin, it's even worse than I thought, Molly said miserably as she looked at the many large splinters protruding from Hermione's back and legs. Her lilac tank top and white sleep shorts were stained with blood. Let me get you something for the pain. No, Hermione said quietly. I don't want it to numb my mind. I still need to talk. You need the potion, she said. It's going to hurt while I heal you. I don't care. I can't lose my wits. It scares me, she whimpered. Molly pursed her lips with concern, but conceded and began removing some of the larger pieces that had stabbed through her shirt. Hermione, love, I'm going to have to remove your clothes to get a better look, Molly told her. She looked up at Draco meaningfully. I'll go, he said in understanding. Still, he sounded disappointed that he would have to leave her. No, please stay, Hermione pleaded. Just sit up here. Draco and Molly exchanged glances, and Draco took a seat on the bed by Hermione's shoulder, staring at her bruised and bloodied face. A sick feeling twisted in his gut. How could this have happened? Molly cut Hermione's clothes off of her so that she wouldn't have to move, and covered the areas that wasn't yet working on. There are so many splinters. How did this happen? Molly asked. The bed, Hermione answered. When I heard them, I grabbed Aurelian and we hid under the bed. I disillusioned us and silenced him, hoping they wouldn't find us, but she knew I was there, and she blew the bed apart. It exploded. The force of it. Aurelian? Molly worried. Is he? I had him under me to protect him. He was shielded from it. It ached when she thought of the way he had quaked in fear beneath her. Draco gently brushed her hair back. You're incredible. She knew where I was because of the boards around me, but she couldn't tell that Aurelian was there. She... Hermione couldn't bring herself to speak of it. She used the Cruciatus curse, Draco said gravely. There was no doubt in his mind. It was his aunt's favorite spell, and he could tell that Hermione had suffered terribly from it by the way her body had been twitching every few seconds since he first pulled her into his arms at the Manor. It was a common aftershock of the spell. Yes, I held on the best I could. Ari was so scared that it broke the silencing spell. She took him away from me. I tried so hard to hold on, to get him back. He was so scared. Hermione's lip quivered and her tears increased. She wondered how she still had tears to cry. Oh, Hermione, Molly said consolingly. He kept crying out to me, Hermione wept. He kept calling out, Mummy, like he couldn't understand why I was letting her hurt him, why I wasn't stopping her. But I tried. I just couldn't protect him. Hermione, you did all you could. You got him out of there, Draco told her, gently stroking her cheek again. I know, but I don't think he understands. He's an intelligent boy. I think he understands better than you imagine. He may not have known what was happening, but he knows that you would never willingly allow that to happen, Molly declared. He loves you. I saw the way he was looking at you just now. He was afraid for you, too. Hermione's stomach twisted. That wasn't what she had seen. She'd seen Aurelian glancing warily at her, then turn away and clinging tightly to Draco. It stung. She worried if he would ever trust her again. It hurt too much to think about. She considered Molly's opinion and tried to view it from Molly's perspective. The boy in the kitchen clung to his father and snuck terrified glances at his mother, who looked unlike he'd ever seen her. Her shoulders slumped dejectedly, her kind face discolored and disfigured, and her rueful eyes haunted and distant. Of course the boy was frightened. She only hoped that it would pass before she saw him next. She needed to hold him, just to know that he was really okay. "She knows he's yours," Hermione said, her eyes meeting Draco's. "When Aurelian called me Mummy, they were surprised rather than confused. They didn't doubt he was mine. She was going to torture him to make me tell her all I knew. But then she saw the ring." The ring? Hermione wasn't sure why she had held on to it rather than allow Harry to lock it away with the time-turner, the memories, and the wand, but she wished that she had let him. Draco only then saw the ring on her right thumb. She pulled it off and handed it to him. "She looked at me, and—" Hermione closed her eyes to steady herself. "She saw it in his face, in his eyes, that he was yours." "It doesn't matter," Draco told her. He felt her gently squeeze his hand and looked sadly upon her bloody fingernails. "She got distracted by the ring. I took my wand and threw her back. I took Aurelian and ran. I summoned the ring and we flew to the manor. It was just the first place I thought of," Hermione said distantly. She was still grimacing and grunting with pain as Molly worked on her. Molly looked in nearly as much pain, twitching and pouting each time Hermione flinched. Draco didn't know how to respond to her. He was only thankful that they were all right. He didn't know what he would have done if they wouldn't have made it. He wouldn't have cared where she flew, so long as she was okay, but it was touching to know that she had thought of him first. When she was in trouble, she knew he could turn to him. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "I'll be right back," he told her. He slid off the bed and crossed the room slowly. The world felt funny. Everything had felt off since Hermione and Aurelian had showed up, but it was the first time he wasn't directly by her side since then, and it felt so wrong. He opened the door just a little ways and blocked the opening with his body to provide Hermione with as much privacy as he could. When he looked up from the floor, he was staring into a set of sad, honey eyes. "How is she?" Ginny asked heavily. "Your mother's tending to her," Draco answered evasively. Of course Hermione wasn't doing well. Her body could mend, but the emotional damage done to her. Was that kind of thing ever fully reparable? That was not the kind of answer Ginny and the others needed, though. They were extremely concerned for her, and he would not be pessimistic, but nor would he lie. "Good. That's good," she said despondently. "I came to let you know that Aurelian is okay. The blood wasn't his. It was just a bruise on his cheek, and your mother healed it. We were worried he might still be in pain, so we gave him some pain potion, and we didn't think you'd mind. I really hope you don't. We gave him some dreamless sleep draught." "No, I think it's good that he rests," Draco agreed. Ginny nodded. "I brought some up for Hermione, too, in case she wants it. I'm pretty sure that she'll argue that she doesn't, but I don't know. Maybe you could talk her into it?" Ginny handed a potion bottle to him and continued. "Also, I brought her up some clothes to change into. They're Harry's. Dad says that we can probably get some clothes from our house in the morning, but we promise not to leave. They'll be big on her. It's just a shirt and some cotton shorts, but I'm sure they'll do better than what she's got." Ginny looked like she was ready to start crying again as she handed the clothes to Draco. "Thanks," Draco said sincerely. He felt the odd inclination to reach out and touch her arm or shoulder in comfort, but it only made him feel more uneasy than he already was. They were alike and close in their shared grief. He was much closer to the Weasleys than he'd ever imagined being. Just take care of her, Draco, okay?" Ginny asked with pleading eyes. "I will," Draco told her solemnly. Slowly, he closed the door and made his way across the room. He quietly placed the clothes and the potion on the dresser top and took his seat on the bed next to Hermione's shoulder. "That was Ginny. She wanted you to know that Aurelian's okay. He's healed, and they gave him a dreamless sleep draught." Hermione nodded. "Good." Her voice sounded forced. She had said everything she needed to before, and in her pain just seemed too difficult to say anything else. "All right now, love," Mrs. Weasley said in voice barely above a whisper. She was trying to be so delicate with Hermione that even her voice was extra soft. "I've healed everything I can see. Does anything else still hurt?" Molly used a warm, wet flannel and gently wiped the dried blood from Hermione's newly healed face. "The back of my head and my left toe. I think it's broken," Hermione managed to get out. She turned her head in Draco's direction, putting her injury closer to Molly. Draco's fingers immediately found her cheek, and his thumb gently ran down her nose. With her face cleaned and repaired, she looked so much better. Draco wasn't as afraid to touch her, and wished to soothe her with a gentle caress. He watched as her body relaxed the instant Molly healed the back of her head. It had obviously been causing her much pain. He was a little upset that she hadn't asked for that to have been done earlier. But he couldn't be really upset with her, not after everything. "Is there anything else, love?" Molly asked, returning up her body after healing her foot. "It still hurts worse than I thought," Hermione admitted. "My muscles and my head, they hurt." "The pain potion. Won't you take it now?" Molly all but pleaded. "Yes, please," Hermione whispered. Once handed the bottle, she lifted herself up onto her elbow and drank the potion. She kept her eyes on Molly, but there was something about her movements that bothered Draco. The way she moved, she seemed so dejected. "I'm sure everyone is waiting to hear how you are," Molly said. "Would you like me to go and talk to everyone, or would you like me to stay with you?" "I don't want them to worry," came Hermione's response. It was Molly's polite way of asking if Hermione would like her to leave, and Hermione appreciated it. "Thank you, Molly." "Rest now, dear," she said, giving Hermione's forehead a light kiss. "Take care of her," she added to Draco. Draco merely nodded. When Molly left, Draco removed the clothes from atop the dresser and brought them over to her. "Ginny brought you some clothes. They're Potter's, but they should do until we can get something else." Draco turned his head as she sat up to give her privacy. He wished to look upon her beautiful nude body one day, but certainly not like this. Not now. To busy himself, he summoned the cloth that Molly had used on Hermione and washed Hermione's blood from his chest. He never wanted to see it again. "Okay," she said quietly. Draco turned around and she saw her sitting up in bed in a loose black t-shirt. It was so long he could hardly see the red shorts that were scrunched up her legs. Draco had hoped that seeing her whole again would ease some of his own pain, but it would just not ebb away. She was physically whole once more, but it didn't make him forget the battered form she was in when she arrived at the Manor. The baggy black t-shirt of Potter's made her look tinier than ever. "She brought you up some dreamless sleep draught, too," Draco told her, pushing her hair behind her ear. "No, please, I don't want it," Hermione pleaded. He didn't understand why she was begging him. He had only offered. He didn't like the sound of her pleading. It only made him think of how much she must have pleaded with Bellatrix. Hermione begged him because she knew that she would cave if he pushed. She wanted to soothe him just as much as he wished to soothe her. "Why?" he asked. "Why do you always refuse the potions that can help you the most?" "Because they take away my control," Hermione admitted quietly. "They numb my thoughts and senses. The pain potion is already doing it. I feel so far away, so unstable. The sleep draught would take my thoughts away completely and would force me to remain unconscious. I don't want that. If I allow my thoughts to drift away, if I relinquish my wits, what do I have left?" She was near tears when she said it. "Please, just hold me." Draco lay down on the bed next to her and pulled her tightly to his chest, burying his nose in her hair. "I love you, Hermione. I'm so sorry." He gritted his teeth together. That night would haunt him forever. Bellatrix would pay. He had no doubts that they would destroy her, but he hoped that he would be given the chance to do it himself. She would pay for hurting them.